You are sitting in a lecture hall on a Thursday afternoon, and the professor is explaining something you already looked up 3 weeks ago. Not because you are smarter, because you needed it for the thing you are building, the thing nobody in this room knows about, the thing you have been working on from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. in a dorm room with a broken desk lamp and a browser with 14 tabs open, and a product that 7 people have already paid you for. 7 people. Real money. Not theoretical money. Not projected revenue from a business plan presentation that gets graded and filed. Actual payments from actual strangers who found what you made and decided it was worth something. The professor finishes the slide. You write nothing down. On the way out, you do the math you have been doing for 6 weeks. The math about time. About what the next 2 years of lectures and assignments and exams and internship applications are actually worth compared to what the next 2 years of building this thing at full capacity might produce. The math does not land cleanly. It never does. But it keeps arriving, and it keeps being the same answer. And eventually, the answer stops being a question and becomes a decision. You leave. Not dramatically, not with a speech. You just stop enrolling. You tell your parents on a Sunday call that goes longer than you planned. You move your stuff into a cheaper place. You open your laptop on a Monday morning with nowhere else to be for the first time in your entire conscious life. This is where it starts, and it looks nothing like what you imagined. The first Monday. There is no alarm. You wake up at 7:43 a.m. because your body has been conditioned to wake up early and has not yet received the message that the schedule has changed. The room is quiet. No class. No obligation pulling you toward a specific building at a specific time. Just the laptop and the idea and the 7 customers who proved the idea was real. You open the laptop. By 9 a.m., you have answered 3 emails, updated a feature that one of the 7 customers complained about, and started a list of everything that needs to happen for the business to support your rent by month 4. The list has 19 items. You work until 1 p.m. and stop because you forgot to eat, and the hunger has turned into the specific low-grade headache that comes from skipping breakfast on a day with high cognitive output. You make food, you sit at the table. And for the first time, the silence hits you in a different way. In school, the structure was given. The schedule existed before you arrived. You showed up, and the day had a shape. Now the shape is yours to make. Every hour is a blank space that you are responsible for filling with the right thing. The right thing. Not just anything, the right thing. The thing that moves the business forward in the specific way it needs to move today. That responsibility feels like freedom at 9 a.m. It feels like vertigo by 2 p.m. You are 20 years old, or 22, or 23, and you have just removed every scaffolding your life was built on and replaced it with a product that 7 people paid for and a list with 19 items and a month 4 deadline that exists only because you wrote it down. This is what leaving looks like from the inside. Not a TED Talk, not a highlight reel. Just a quiet Monday with a headache and a list and the specific strange weight of complete self-determination. What you told everyone and what everyone said back. You told your parents first. Your mother asked if you were sure 5 times across 40 minutes, each time with a slightly different framing, each time with the same underlying question beneath it. The question was not about the business. It was about the risk. About what happens if it doesn't work. About the version of the future she had been quietly holding in her mind since you got accepted. The graduation photo, the stable first job, the beginning of the trajectory she had imagined for you since before you knew what a trajectory was. You tried to explain the 7 customers, the revenue, the product that people were already paying for without a marketing budget or a pitch deck or a business development team. She listened. She said she was proud of you and worried about you in the same sentence, and both things were completely true at the same time. Your father said less. He asked about the plan. You walked him through the plan. He asked about the backup plan. You walked him through that too. He did not say he supported it. He did not say he didn't. He said, "Call me when the numbers change." And he meant that in both directions. Your friends split almost immediately into two groups. The first group was excited in the way people are excited when the thing is happening to someone else and the risk is not theirs. They told you it was brave. They sent the articles about the famous founders who dropped out. They said they wished they could do what you were doing, which is the thing people say when they are not going to do it. You appreciated the energy. You understood that it was not quite real. The second group was skeptical, in the way that people who care about you are skeptical. They asked the questions your parents asked. They pointed out that a degree was an insurance policy. They noted that 7 customers was not a company. They told you stories about people they knew who had tried something similar and come back 2 years later with nothing to show for it except the gap in their resume. You listened to the second group more carefully than the first, not because they were right, because the questions they were asking were the questions you were going to have to answer with results eventually. And the faster you understood exactly what they were skeptical about, the faster you could build the evidence that addressed it. Skepticism from people who care about you is not an obstacle. It is a free map of where the proof of concept still needs to be built. Month 1. The realness problem. The business is real in the sense that it exists and produces revenue. It is not real in the sense of being an entity with systems, repeatability, and predictable growth. It is real the way a campfire is real. It is producing heat and light, but it requires constant attention and the right conditions. And one wrong move and it goes out, and you are back to the beginning with cold hands. Your 7 customers came from one source, a post that went slightly viral in a niche community you were already part of. That post is 3 weeks old. The traffic it produced has slowed to almost nothing. The 7 customers have not become 14. You have not found the next post, the next channel, the next repeatable mechanism that produces customers without requiring a lucky moment. This is the first real problem. Not the product. The product works. The customers who paid are using it, and one of them sent an email that used the word changed in a way that you have read 4 times and continue to read when the doubt arrives, which it does, consistently, around 4 p.m. on the days when the work feels like it is going nowhere. The real problem is acquisition, the mechanism for finding more people who need what you built. In school, this problem did not exist because you were not selling anything. The market for your existence as a student was solved by the institution. You showed up, you performed, you advanced. The feedback loop was clear, and the inputs were defined. In business, nothing is defined for you. The feedback loop is whatever you build it to be. The inputs are whatever you choose to prioritize. The advancement happens when you find the thing that works. And finding the thing that works requires trying 15 things that don't. And trying 15 things requires the specific kind of patience that the first month does not yet have room for, because the rent deadline is real and the bank account is counting down. You spend month 1 trying 4 different acquisition channels. 2 produce nothing. 1 produces 1 customer. 1 produces 3 customers. 11 customers total. Not enough, but enough to know which direction to face. You face that direction. You go deeper. The money problem. By month 2, you understand the money problem in a way you did not when the decision was being made. The decision was made when you had the dorm room, the meal plan, the campus infrastructure, and a part-time job that covered incidentals. The cost of your existence as a student was partially subsidized by the institution and partially funded by your family, and the part-time hours were covering the gap without requiring the business to support itself. Now, the cost is different. Rent is $850 a month, the cheapest place you could find in a city where the kind of people who would buy your product actually live. Utilities are $90. Food is somewhere between $200 and $350, depending on how disciplined you are and how many days the work goes badly and the discipline migrates to the food budget. Subscriptions and software tools that the business requires total $140 a month. Phone, basic health insurance from the marketplace because the university coverage ended when you stopped enrolling. Transportation. Total monthly outgoing, approximately $1,600. Monthly revenue from the business at 11 customers, approximately $550. The gap is $1,050 a month. You have $4,200 in savings, which means you have roughly 4 months before the math becomes a different kind of problem. Not an abstract problem, a specific date-stamped problem with a month attached to it. This is the number that reframes everything. Before the number, the business was an exciting project with momentum. After the number, the business is a race with a visible finish line, and the finish line is 4 months away. That reframing is not entirely bad. Urgency is productive when it is directed correctly. The problem is that urgency can also compress decisions in the way that financial pressure always compresses decisions. And compressed decisions are usually worse decisions. And worse decisions in the early stage of a business cost more than they cost later because there is no margin to absorb them. You make a list. Not a 19-item list, a shorter list. 3 things that, if they work, will close the gap. Not 10 experiments, 3 bets. You are a 4-month runway, and you do not have the resources for 10 experiments. You have the resources for 3 bets made well. You pick the 3. You work them completely. What nobody tells you about the work. The work is not what you thought it would be. You thought leaving school would mean working on the interesting parts of the business constantly. The product, the vision, the strategy that would take you from 11 customers to 1,000. You imagine the days as full of building and thinking and creating, interrupted only by the minor administrative tasks that you would eventually hire someone to handle. The actual work is 40% administrative. Customer emails that require real responses. Accounting that requires actual attention because you are now responsible for tracking your own income and expenses, and the government has opinions about how that is handled. Legal documents you did not know you needed until you needed them. A refund request from a customer who is not happy and who is right about why they are not happy, and whose rightness requires both the refund and the product improvement. The software tool that stopped working on a Tuesday, and whose failure is causing 2 of your customers to have a bad experience, and whose support ticket has been open for 3 days without a resolution. None of this was in the vision. All of it is in the business. The founders who became famous did not become famous for handling customer refunds gracefully, or for maintaining clean accounting records, or for the specific skill of triaging 11 simultaneous problems on a Tuesday when the software is broken. They became famous for the result, which was produced by years of exactly this kind of Tuesday that nobody writes about because nobody wants to read about it. You handle the Tuesday. You fix the software issue by switching tools, which costs 6 hours and $47 in a new monthly subscription. You handle the refund with a note that is honest about the failure and an offer that is genuinely better than what the customer asked for. You spend 2 hours on accounting and feel the mild, specific satisfaction of a spreadsheet that reconciles correctly. By the end of the Tuesday that was supposed to be a strategy day, you have done nothing strategic. You have kept the machine running. That is not nothing. Keeping the machine running is the work that makes the strategy possible. You cannot build on a broken foundation, and the foundation is made of exactly these Tuesdays. Month 4, the test. The runway is almost gone. You have $900 left in savings. The monthly gap has narrowed from $1,050 to $480 because the business grew. 22 customers now. Monthly revenue at $1,120. Getting closer, but not there. The question the fourth month asks is not whether the business works. The question is whether it works fast enough. Fast enough to not require a choice between the business and a job that covers the gap. Fast enough to not require going back to school as the backup option. Fast enough to justify the decision that was made 6 months ago in a lecture hall on a Thursday afternoon. The honest answer in month 4 is not yet. Not quite yet. You take a part-time contract, 12 hours a week, remote, in a field adjacent enough to the business that the skills overlap. The contract pays $900 a month. Not enough to live on, enough to extend the runway by 3 months. You do not call this failure. You call it bridge capital. The same concept venture-backed startups use when the next funding round is closed but not yet closed. You are raising bridge capital from your own labor. The destination has not changed. The timeline has adjusted. This is the decision that most people who leave school do not see coming. The version of the story they imagined did not include the part-time contract. The version they imagined went directly from the decision to the inflection point. The part-time contract was not in the plan, and finding it in the plan anyway does not mean the plan failed. It means the plan is real. Plans that never require adjustment were never real plans. They were projections. A real plan is a living thing that responds to the actual conditions it encounters, and the actual conditions in month 4 include a $900 savings balance and a $480 monthly gap. The plan responds. You respond with it. What school was actually teaching you? Around month 5, something unexpected happens. You start missing specific things about school. Not the degree, not the schedule, specific things. The conversations. The particular kind of thinking that happens when a group of people who are all studying the same subject sit in a room and argue about it. The access to people who had done things and were willing to explain how and why. The forced exposure to subjects outside your core interest that occasionally produced a connection you would not have made otherwise. You do not miss the institution, you miss the learning density. Business, you discover, has learning density, but it is distributed differently. The lessons arrive when they arrive, often in the middle of a problem you did not ask to have, compressed into a format that requires immediate application. There is no time to sit with the concept, to read the theory, to understand the history of the idea before you are required to use it. You use it first and understand it later. And sometimes the using it first goes badly, and the understanding it later is expensive. You start buying books, not textbooks. Books written by people who built the kind of thing you are building and were honest enough to write about what it actually cost them. You read them at night, not as relaxation, as instruction. You find communities online where the people are far enough ahead of you to be useful and close enough to your stage to be relevant. You pay for the course that the community recommends, not because the credential matters, but because the information is condensed in a way that saves you weeks. You are building your own curriculum. It is slower than the institutional version and faster than random experience. It is more expensive than the library and cheaper than the tuition. It is perfectly calibrated to exactly what the business needs right now, which is both its greatest advantage and its most significant risk. The greatest advantage is that nothing is wasted. Every concept connects directly to a live application. The most significant risk is that you do not know what you do not know. The institutional curriculum exposed you to things you would never have chosen to learn because you did not yet know you needed them. Your self-directed curriculum only contains what you know to look for. The gaps are invisible by definition. You address this by staying close to people who are ahead of you. Their problems are your preview. What they are solving now, the inflection point. The part-time contract was not in the plan, and finding it in the plan anyway does not mean the plan failed. It means the plan is real. Plans that never require adjustment were never real plans. They were projections. A real plan is a living thing that responds to the actual conditions it encounters. And the actual conditions in month 4 include a $900 savings balance and a $480 monthly gap. The plan responds. You respond with it. What school was actually teaching you? Around month 5, something unexpected happens. You start missing specific things about school. Not the degree, not the schedule, specific things. The conversations. The particular kind of thinking that happens when a group of people who are all studying the same subject sit in a room and argue about it. The access to people who had done things and were willing to explain how and why. The forced exposure to subjects outside your core interest that occasionally produced a connection you would not have made otherwise. You do not miss the institution, you miss the learning density. Business, you discover, has learning density, but it is distributed differently. The lessons arrive when they arrive, often in the middle of a problem you did not ask to have, compressed into a format that requires immediate application. There is no time to sit with the concept, to read the theory, to understand the history of the idea before you are required to use it. You use it first and understand it later. And sometimes the using it first goes badly, and the understanding it later is expensive. You start buying books. Not textbooks. Books written by people who built the kind of thing you are building and were honest enough to write about what it actually cost them. You read them at night, not as relaxation, as instruction. You find communities online where the people are far enough ahead of you to be useful and close enough to your stage to be relevant. You pay for the course that the community recommends, not because the credential matters, but because the information is condensed in a way that saves you weeks. You are building your own curriculum. It is slower than the institutional version and faster than random experience. It is more expensive than the library and cheaper than the tuition. It is perfectly calibrated to exactly what the business needs right now, which is both its greatest advantage and its most significant risk. The greatest advantage is that nothing is wasted. Every concept connects directly to a live application. The most significant risk is that you do not know what you do not know. The institutional curriculum exposed you to things you would never have chosen to learn because you did not yet know you needed them. Your self-directed curriculum only contains what you know to look for. The gaps are invisible by definition. You address this by staying close to people who are ahead of you. Their problems are your preview. What they are solving now is what you will need to solve in 6 months. You pay close attention. The inflection point. It does not arrive dramatically. You are 11 months in. The contract ended 3 months ago because the business crossed the revenue threshold that made it unnecessary. 38 customers. Monthly recurring revenue at $3,800. The gap closed quietly sometime in month 8, and you did not immediately notice because you were working through a product problem and the accounting was 2 weeks behind. You notice in month 9. You open the spreadsheet on a Sunday morning, and the numbers are on the right side of 0 for the 3rd consecutive month. Not comfortable, not wealthy, but self-sustaining. The business is paying for your life without external support. This is not the success story. This is the beginning of the sustainable operating phase, which is different from success and more important than it. Success is a moment. The sustainable operating phase is the platform that makes everything that follows possible. You also notice something about yourself that is harder to quantify. You think about problems differently than you did a year ago. Not better in every way, worse in some ways actually. You are less patient with theory. You are less comfortable with ambiguity that is not action-oriented. You have developed opinions that are too strong in places where your sample size is too small. but better in the specific ways that matter for this work. You see the gap between what people say they need and what they actually pay for. And the gap is visible to you now in the way that a certain kind of blindness becomes visible once you've spent enough time in the specific light that illuminates it. You understand how to test something cheaply before building it expensively. You know how to have a conversation with a customer that produces useful information instead of just positive feedback. You can hold two contradictory priorities in mind and navigate between them without losing either. These are not skills with a certificate attached. They are the kind of skills that look like intuition from the outside and feel like scar tissue from the inside. What leaving actually costs you are 1 year and 3 months out of school. The honest accounting requires looking at both columns. The cost column first, because that is the one nobody wants to read, but everyone needs to. You do not have the degree. That is a permanent fact. Not a catastrophe, but a fact. There are professional paths that are now longer for you than they would have been. Certain institutional credibility that takes more time to build without the credential. A specific kind of legitimacy in certain rooms that the piece of paper provides, and that your track record has not yet fully replaced, though it is replacing it. You lost the experience of finishing something. That is smaller than it sounds, but realer than it seems. There is a specific development that happens in the final years of a program that is not about the content. It is about learning to complete a long project under conditions that are not ideal and that require more from you than you initially expected. You did not get that. You got a different version of it, the business version, which is harder and longer and produces no ceremony at the end. You spent a year in varying degrees of financial stress that produced some useful urgency and some bad decisions. One decision that still bothers you at quiet moments. A contract you signed too quickly because the runway was short and the caution was expensive. You know what that decision cost in exact dollar terms, and you carry it as a calibration. The relationships that required shared experience in the same place at the same time to form. The people you would have met in the classes you did not take. The intellectual friendships that happen when two people discover they are interested in the same obscure thing in a seminar room at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday in October. You do not know what those would have been. You know they did not happen. Now the other column. 38 customers became, by month 14, 81. Monthly recurring revenue at $8,100. Not wealth, not yet close to wealth, but real, independent, self-funded income from a product you built with nobody's permission and nobody's money and nobody's institutional backing. You understand your work at a depth that 4 years of studying it would not have produced. Not because school is less than building, because building the thing teaches you the thing in the specific way that only consequence can teach. The stakes were yours. The losses were yours. The wins were yours. The education was expensive and entirely personal, and produced a practitioner rather than a student. You have a year and 3 months of evidence that you can identify a problem, build a solution, find the people who have the problem, convince them the solution is worth paying for, and sustain the operation long enough to make the whole system self-funding. That evidence is portable. It travels with you into every room you will ever enter. It is not theoretical. It happened. The question you get asked. People ask you if it was worth it. You answer honestly, which means you do not answer simply. You say it was worth it for the specific thing it produced, and not worth it for the specific things it cost. You say the calculation only makes sense in one direction, forward, because the return on a decision cannot be evaluated from a position that does not include the compounding of what the decision produced. You say that if you had stayed, you would have graduated with the credential and without the 81 customers, and without the year of scars, and without the specific understanding of how things actually work when the theory meets the money. You do not say leaving is right. You do not say staying is wrong. You say the question is the wrong question. The question is not school or not school. The question is what the specific thing you are building requires right now, and whether you are building it or explaining why you haven't started yet. The explanation that delays starting by 4 years is expensive in a different way than the tuition. The tuition ends. Time does not. And the people asking you if it was worth it are mostly asking because they are holding the same decision in their hands. And they want someone to tell them which side is right, so they can make the choice without the weight of not knowing. You cannot give them that. Nobody can. The weight is the admission price. It does not go away. You carry it forward and let the building reduce it over time, not by solving it, by making it irrelevant. The lecture hall is still there. The laptop is still open. The 38 customers who became 81 are still paying. And somewhere in another dorm room at 1 a.m., somebody else is looking at 7 customers and a spreadsheet and a decision that keeps arriving with the same answer. They are about to close the laptop and go to sleep. Or they are about to start building. Only one of those versions of tonight compounds into something.